Welcome everyone to this quad education webinar on refining your personal statement and tips, tricks, and mistakes to avoid. I want to thank you all for joining us. My name is Hallie Caldwell, and I'm a member of the quad education team. We're an academic consulting firm designed and dedicated to helping high school students improve their college profiles and increase their chances of acceptance at their choice schools. We have two fantastic consultants with us here today who work with students like you who are in the process of developing their college profiles, applying to college. And we're lucky to have them. They're fantastic and are here to give you a lot of information. All right, so today we will introduce our panelists and then talk about why it's important to take time to refine your personal statement after you have a first draft down. Talk about ways that you can elevate your personal statement, how to finish refining it. We'll talk about some common pitfalls and how to avoid them, go over some last minute tips, and then open things up for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A box and we will get to those at the end. Additionally, we are recording this webinar and we'll send this out in the next couple days for you to have to look back on later in case you forget some important details. All right, so today we have Fedjounie and Arianna with us. Fedjounie, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much. I am a college access and admissions counselor. I have been working with students for the past 7 years. I am working with Princeton University since last year, April around this time. And I am very passionate about supporting students in gaining access to college education and whatever their post-secondary pathways are.
Thank you so much for being here. Arianna, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name's Arianna Lee. I'm an admissions counselor here at Quad, and I graduated from Dartmouth College with a degree in neuroscience. And ever since, I've been truly honing in on that passion of helping students and families like yourselves navigate the college application process and truly be successful in that endeavor. So I'm truly excited about the topic today because that is definitely the major question that a lot of my students have.
All right, thank you so much for being here. So we will dive right in and just talk about refining your personal statement and why it's important to take the time to refine it.
Awesome. So yes, refining your college personal statement is so important. This is your best opportunity to truly showcase your personality and everything that makes you stand out from the hundreds and thousands of applicants that you're, in a sense, competing against. So you really want to try and develop a well-crafted personal statement because that is going to make the difference to admissions officers in figuring out who is this applicant and what else can we learn about them and how are they going to add to our college campus and do they align with our values and what we stand for.
Yes, exactly as Arianna said, think about your personal statement as one of the key qualitative, right? Like you have a lot of GPA scores, test scores, and like numbers that you're sending to places, but your personal statement is a document where you can really show who you are and what really matters to you. And it's most important to the admissions committee in developing a picture of who you are and what you want to contribute to the school community. So next, we want to think about a couple of the important aspects that you can highlight in your personal statement, such as your strengths, your unique perspective, and really think about the impression that you are leaving on the admissions committee. Typically, the personal statement is 650 words in length, right? So you can write a very clear and concise narrative that will greatly increase your chances of being accepted into your dream schools, okay?
All right, so let's talk a little bit about elevating your personal statements.
Awesome. So absolutely, just going further onto what we already were speaking on, tailoring your statement. How do we further emphasize that unique perspective and that personality that you want to bring across? So again, researching the school, figuring out the program that you want to apply to. Some schools have different colleges that you might be applying specifically to, and they might have additional questions that they may ask you. So you really want to research the schools to basically understand their values, what they prioritize, what is the main area of focus that they're looking for, anything that you can get an insight on that can help, that can further help you highlight those strengths within yourself in your personal statement and aligning your goals with the school's mission. Also, remember, you have to also, you're looking for if you fit the school's values, but you also want to make sure, does the school fit your values? So really take that time to research the school thoroughly. You can get a better understanding and see if you all are a good match for each other. Looking also to address any specific questions or prompts clearly. So prompt guidelines are designed to assess your fit for the school, your goals and aspirations, and how you can add to the school's culture. So addressing the prompt clearly in your personal statement is very important. You don't want to really, how to say this, be all over the place in your personal statement. You really want to outline, figure out what are the strengths and weaknesses that you're trying to showcase about yourself, less so on the weaknesses, but of course, within reason. Figure out what do you want to tell the school's committee, what is important to you to bring across, and how is your personal statement going to address that?
Yeah, specifically to the point of like researching schools and programs, think about taking trips, right? Tours to these schools, asking questions of your tour guides, students on campus, so that you can add that added layer of just information, checking out schools' websites, as well as utilizing websites like niche.com that give you a lot of information about how students are experiencing their 4 years at whichever school you're interested in, and using that to tailor your statement as well. Thank you, Arianna, for that clear point. So we're going to go to our next point where we're thinking about how you can improve your writing, right? So as Arianna highlighted earlier, we want to think about you as an individual and some of those unique perspectives and viewpoints that you have. So you should use a strong and active voice to make your writing a bit more impactful, right? And dynamic. Interesting. We're thinking about ways that we can use some of the things you're learning in your English classrooms and how you're writing an essay. This isn't necessarily a formal English essay, but think about ways you can grab your reader or use different literary skills to bring forth your message, right? We want to vary your sentence structure and length. So we're not having very long sentences where we're just speaking like we're so speaking, but like breaking it up, right? Where you have short sentence followed by a long sentence, followed by a middle, like mix it so it can mimic the natural cadence of your voice and also bring some of those rich elements of your personality across on the page, right? And that brings us to our last point, using creative storytelling techniques. So thinking about ways that you can add different aspects of your personality. So one of my students is in love with the arts and they wrote a poem like personal statement, right? If you want to write a personal statement that really speaks to your academic interest in science or something like that, like think about all of the things that create the many different puzzle pieces of you and how you can use that to paint a very vivid picture in the reader's mind and make your personal statement more impactful.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought that up in regards to the poem. That is so awesome that your student is doing that. And again, the descriptiveness, if you're going to tell us about your passion of cooking, we want to taste the food that you're making. Like, let us fall in love with your writing. This is going to help you stand that much further out from your competitors, so to speak. I hate to make it sound like a competition, but it is. So you really want to let the admissions reader remember your application, like let that personal statement speak for itself. Awesome. And following through with that, writing a strong introduction and conclusion, what better way to create that first impression and that lasting memory? So using a hook to grab the reader's attention. A well-crafted hook can make your personal statement stand out that much further. And again, it can help you establish your voice, your personality, get that enthusiasm across. So for example, a strong hook, maybe that is, so for example, one of my students wrote on, the machines that you put a pinball in and you follow where the pinball is going. I believe they're called Rube Goldberg machines. But anyways, that was one of the hooks that we immediately get the attention of where the pinball is going through his essay and is following his own growth and development throughout the essay. And the hook just kept coming back to where the pinball is in the machine. So whatever your hook is, we want to leave that lasting impression for the admissions reader. And then again, summarizing your main points. So restating your thesis and your conclusion brings your essay full circle and helps the reader understand, okay, what were the different parts of your essay? How did they all come together? Here were your main points. Admission readers, or they get a lot of applications that they're looking through, right? So how are you going to help them remember who you are? You want to keep re-emphasizing, here's how I've developed, here's this lasting impression, my conclusion, and here are the main points as far as why you should admit me as a student to your university. Doing this will ultimately leave that lasting impression and emphasize your main message and make it that much more memorable.
Yes. Along that, like, great advice, right? Think about the ways that you can use details, dialogue, and description in your hook. A lot of my students, they like to use alliteration, or they'll like quote from a direct moment, right? Think about ways that you can grab the audience and keep them wanting more. That is the point of the hook, to keep the reader going through your essay and to also introduce the theme, right? So you'll have a central theme of your narrative, even though you'll be focusing on different moments throughout. It's great to set the stage for the person who's reading it to understand, okay, this is where the story's going, right? Like, not to give them everything, but to give them a little teaser that'll keep them going.
Absolutely. All right, so let's talk a little bit about reviewing and editing your personal statements.
So one of the most helpful tips that I can share with you all about reviewing and editing your personal statement is reading your statement aloud. And it's very helpful, right? Because you can do this by yourself, you can do this with other people, but it's a really great way to catch errors that we often have, or just will gloss over because we know our writing styles, right? Another very cool trick for our technologically savvy or not technologically savvy, you can use a read aloud tool on Microsoft Word as well as on Google Docs to have your computer read your essay to you. You could go old school and just read it aloud yourself, but I think using both options will really be a foolproof way to identify any large errors or weird, awkward phrasing, so that you can make sure that there aren't also redundancies outside along your essay as well. So think about how your ideas are flowing together and how the words sound, and think about where you can boost your personal statement to make it a bit more impactful, okay?
Awesome. Absolutely. And I'll also add to that to say reading aloud to an audience as well. Sometimes hearing how we speak out loud to ourselves, it might not come across that way to others. So it's good to always get multiple opinions and perspectives and say, hey, maybe I could word it this way. Maybe I thought it came across this way, but it really doesn't. So I'll just rephrase this. That's another option too, but that's awesome.
I feel like this is a method I still use in my day-to-day life.
Same. It's great for proofreading emails.
Yes, definitely. Speaking of proofreading.
Awesome. So yes, proofreading and checking for grammar and spelling errors. So important because, again, if you are turning this into admissions, they're going to want to know, okay, if you didn't take time to thoroughly check and read over your personal essay, how much time did you really take with this? How important is this to you? So proofreading a personal statement is essential. It helps to catch any errors in grammar, spelling, punctuation, anything that you might initially just gloss over. It's also really great to use, Microsoft has spell check. There's many programs online that you can actually input your essays and get just quick spelling error check or grammar check. And again, using the first method, reading aloud, you can probably catch a lot of grammar errors that way as well. So it's very important to keep checking for errors, even at the last moment when you're getting ready to turn it in. I promise you, you'll find something. Just do another thorough check and make sure it's all good before you submit.
Yes, definitely check and double check. I have to be completely honest. I wrote my personal statement for months, 6 months. I started very early after my junior year, and I actually had several iterations of my personal statement. So this process is a lot of just editing and really going over it a lot of times. So I love that you highlighted that, Arianna. And that kind of leads into our next point about having someone else read and provide feedback. So just as Arianna mentioned, right, like it's important to read aloud to an audience, and it's just as important to have someone sit with your work, someone you know, right, as well as potentially someone who doesn't know you as well, so that they can share and help you understand, right? If it's your family members who are reflecting on your personal statement, they can give you key pointers about maybe experiences you could write that could push your narrative a bit farther. If it's a stranger, you could ask them, this is what I want to say. Does it say that? Right? Sometimes we know exactly what we want to say and it looks like that in our mind, but it's not really the reality that we find within the statement. So it's an opportunity to really get some valuable feedback and fresh perspectives on your writing, because this will be something that you're taking a lot of time with. And after a couple of months of reading the same line, it may sound the same and perfect, but there may be some pointers where you can make it a bit better. Okay.
Absolutely. And wonderfully put. I would also say, you can get your friends and peers to edit getting multiple viewpoints is awesome, but try and at least get 3, whether that's your guidance counselor, English teacher, science teacher, just get at least 3 different viewpoints as far as who's editing.
All right. So now we're going to talk about some common pitfalls and how to avoid them. So common mistakes that we see. And the first is generic or cliche statements.
Yes. Avoid generic or cliche statements. And the reason to do that is because the reason that they're generic or cliche is because many people have used them before. So you really want to make your writing stand out. You don't want it to seem unoriginal or, not leave that lasting impression. The point of writing the personal statement is to get your unique personality across. No one is you. You're as you can be. So truly let that shine through in your essay. Avoid this by saying, I would really love to go to your school, or I don't know, Fedjounie, do you have any generic cliche statements that you've seen come through?
Yes, I would love to go to your school because it's so prestigious. So and so loves this school, right? Like those kinds of things that don't necessarily speak to the value or the impact that specific school will have on you as a person. We want to avoid those. And actually, I like to advise my students to think of 2 points, right? Think about you and think about the school. Whenever you're making any like general statements or anything, like how can you make this more unique to you and to the specific things that you want from this school? If it's internships, if it's the professors that they have, right? Or if it's a specific class or program, think about how you can bring different elements from your research about those things into your writing. So it's specific. You want to, if you were to drop your personal statement without your name on it and someone were to pick it up, they could say, oh, yes, this is blah, blah, blah's personal statement. Like that's how specific you want it to be. Okay.
Very true. That is your signature. Your writing is your signature. And just another point too on that one. If you're pursuing medicine, because I was pre-med, but if you're pursuing medicine, try and think of, don't think of the common, this is why I want to go into medicine, or this is why I'm going to be a doctor. Try and think outside of the box as far as what really inspired you. And it doesn't have to be this, I worked at a hospital and let me write on this topic for my personal statement now, because that's what caused me to want to be a doctor. Try and really dig deep in your personal statement. You know, it is therapeutic. It is you really thinking over your life and your progression. And it's okay to take time to do that. So really outline and try and think outside of the box and not just come up with things that you think admissions officers want you to say.
Arianna, I think in our last webinar on personal statements, you had a really good tip on 4 things like, say you want to go into medicine, asking yourself why and really getting down to the root of that. Can you just like kind of gloss over that quickly?
Yes, absolutely. Every time that you're writing your outline or anything as far as why you want to do anything, keep asking the why. Why do I love medicine? It's because I love helping people. Why do you love helping people? Because I do that. Keep asking yourself why until it becomes so repetitive and so annoying to you, until you get down to the crutch of what is you, so to speak. And again, if you're having trouble developing that, it's okay to ask others, even ask family members to further dig deep into why or what inspires you.
All right. So we did kind of cover this in the last slide, but we'll go over this briefly before we move on to the next thing to avoid.
Yes. So I will cover this. We have already covered it a little bit. So I want to be a bit more specific about how I support you all in understanding how to combat this, right? So using specific details that can illustrate your experiences and skills will definitely go a long way, right? We want to think about like what you saw in the moment, right? Like, what did you hear? What did you taste? What did you touch? Add those personal touches as well to the narrative or the story that you're telling the admissions committee, right? Think about how you can illustrate your story. It's one thing to say, I want to go into medicine because so-and-so, but it's another thing to say, when I see the Oreo borealis, I realize that light reflecting is the key to being able to understand medicine better. And this is how I like providing those details and really being clear about how you've gotten from point A to point B will bring more of a story to it and not just like a resume that reads about your personal experiences or things like that, right? Like bring out the things that you wouldn't necessarily put into a resume. What did you learn? How has this affected your character? Think about these questions when you're writing your personal statement.
All right, let's talk about choosing words.
Yes, so overuse of thesaurus or fancy words. Now, how many of you all try to sound a specific way and you start throwing in as many just words you think admissions officers just will love? Well, the more that you do that, the more that it doesn't sound natural. That's really the key. Sounding natural, sounding you. If you normally use these types of words, then by all means. But if you're going out of your way to use this complex language, it's going to be evident very quickly. So just make sure if you're using overly complex language, it can make the writing a bit more difficult to understand and may come across as not sincere, not you. So focus on using simple, direct language to convey your message. So that way it's a genuine connection with your reader. You want to make sure that your language is easy to connect with. So instead of just using all fancy language or all large words, maybe you vary it, just similar to the sentence structure. Vary the word use that you want to throw in. Even if this is natural to you to use, maybe you, instead of putting it all in one sentence, you split it up. So that way it is not overpowering for the reader, but it is still genuine to you if that's who you are as a writer.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about combating this. We covered it a little bit, but we'll dive in here.
So as Arianna has shared and is hinting to, right, admissions officers read hundreds of statements within a 3-month period. So there's a lot going on within that decision room, and often not using clear and simple language gets your story jumbled in the words, right? Like, we call this word salad, where you see a lot of good words being used, SAT words, ACT words, expanding your vocabulary, but it doesn't really add value. So I want you guys to think of the weight of your words, right? Because ultimately every word matters when you have a 650 word count. So think about ways that you can be concise and precise in your language to really convey your story. Okay. And think about this as informal, like a formal, informal conversational kind of essay that doesn't follow the specific rubrics of like an English essay, right? You have a little bit more leeway in writing a personal statement. So take advantage of that and really utilize the structure to highlight those key points about your character, who you are as a person, and your voice ultimately, right? Convey your ideas clearly so that there's no question about what motivates you, why you want this, how you're going to go about it. Okay.
One of our admissions officers who talks a lot about this is one of his favorite things to say is don't use a 25-cent word when you can use a 5-cent word. All right, negative tone.
Yes, so negative tone, using a negative tone in your personal statement can make a bad impression on the admissions committee. And it's different from negative tone versus negative experience that you're trying to write about. Negative tone will tell the admissions committee, you know, the applicants that they're looking for. They are looking for positive. What have you grown? What have you learned from this? How have you grown from this experience? And you can convey a negative experience in a constructive. I've learned from this. Here is what has now led me to become this individual, or this is now what I am doing from this experience that I've learned all of this from. So focusing on negative experiences can also distract from the overall message and theme of your personal statement. So make sure to frame it in a way that you have, you're showcasing your strength and your accomplishments. So we don't want to trauma dump, so to speak. We don't want it to be only negative, where that's where the admissions officer is putting your application down and just remembering the negative aspects of what you talked about, and not where you are now and how you plan to contribute and how you plan to go on and do all of these amazing things. You don't want them to have that lasting impression of just negativity.
I definitely agree. As Arianna is saying, right, like admissions officers are also mandated reporters. So some things that you share will go beyond that admissions counseling room. So really think about what you're sharing and how ultimately the person reading it on the other side will have to take that home too, you know? And there are ways that you can combat this, which we'll focus on now, right? Like think about the positive experiences and outcomes that you've had. Use optimistic language. If you are criticizing others, right, that's like putting it in negative lens. If you've ever heard of like growth or fixed mindset, right? The growth mindset says yes, and while the fixed mindset says, no, I'm trapped, right? Like think about all the ways that you have grown from these negative experiences and focus more so on what the future has to hold rather than the intimate details of whatever that negative experience may be. Or it may just be like the way that you talk about the experiences that you've had with others, or the way that you've experienced others, right? You don't want to focus your personal statement on disparaging a former teacher or a bad friend, right? This is about you. So let's focus on you.
No, absolutely. And I would say also, remember, admissions are looking for how you're going to fit into their campus. So if your entire personal statement is saying, this teacher gave me a bad grade and it's their fault and I did everything right and there's nothing, they want to see, what did you learn from this experience? Even just to throw it out there, even if it's true that you were completely innocent, what did you learn from this experience and how are you applying this to the future? How have you now grown from this, or how's that shaped you since then? How are you going to be on our campus? Is everything going to be everyone else's problem or everyone else's fault? Or how are you going to mold yourself into this campus? Exaggeration or false information. So exaggerating or fabricating any part or all of your personal statement is unethical and can lead to severe consequences. So I just have to reiterate it, because a lot of students, they are thinking, how can, I understand a lot of pressure is on a lot of students. So they think, how can I best fit to what the admissions officers are looking for? I will come up with anything to shape and fit myself to what the admissions officers are looking for. Don't do that. It's not good to do. That will lead to rejection, rescinding your acceptance if it's discovered later. It'll harm your credibility. It could go on to be bigger than what you expected it to be. And most importantly, hold on to what should be dear to you, which is your integrity. So make sure that when you're writing, be honest, be genuine, be as you can be. That's what they're looking for. They're not looking for what you expect them to be. They're not looking for, for you to be this amazing rocket scientist that you've done all these great experiments. No, they're looking for what you genuinely are doing. That's going to make you stand out the most.
All right, so I'm combating this, this is a theme that we've talked about through this entire webinar, but very important.
Yes, directly in line with what Arianna was sharing, right, about being honest, being transparent, right? Being authentic. This is one of the more important things. We know that a lot of your students are applying to very competitive schools, and these schools also will have interviews. So there will be other records of conversations and things that are being had. And it's hard to keep track of little white lies in your personal statement versus the things that you told the person you're interviewing. So coming at this intentionally with an authentic presentation, and trying to make a genuine connection with your reader will help show some of those unique qualities, experiences, and perspectives that you can provide to a college community, right? We want your best self to shine through in your writing. And this ultimately will help your application stand out.
Yes, so like we already touched on earlier, proofreading, make sure that you are avoiding lack of proofreading. So grammatical errors and typos can distract from the content and message of your essay. It makes it difficult for the reader to understand what you're trying to say. And depending on how bad the grammatical errors are, it will negatively impact the admissions committee's perception of you. Again, it shows, did you take the time to look at this at all, or what type of student are you going to be? Are you going to turn in non-proofread work? Is this the person that we're potentially accepting into our school? So it's important to take the time to proofread and edit your personal statement to ensure that it is error-free and communicate your message clearly and effectively. That's what you want to get across.
Yes, that's definitely important. It's key to remember that you are applying to an institution, an academic institution, and ultimately they want to know that you have the writing skills to be successful in their seminars and their lectures, right? That you'll be able to really write something that is persuasive and has all the different elements that are necessary, right? As it relates to editing and proofreading, we definitely recommend using spell check and grammar tools, online tools, in whatever essay writing format or document that you use. Try to utilize their tools. I love Google Chrome extensions. Grammarly is my best friend, and it helps me with writing even personal emails, right? Definitely thinking about how you can use your community, your teachers, your friends, having other people proofread your work, as well as providing you that key feedback will definitely push your personal statement above and beyond, okay? I think it is also important when you are working with those people who support you, be it a guidance counselor, teacher, a friend, family members, ask them for that important insight about how your message is coming across, right? And ask them for suggestions for improvement, and take that with a grain of salt in changing and adapting what you already have put forth, okay? Awesome.
I think we should also say that the folks reading your personal statements are not sitting there with a red pen and saying, there should have been a comma here, there's no comma here, you're not coming to our school. So you definitely want to proofread, you want it to look really good and thought out, but it's also not the main thing. It's not the main thing being looked at. So it is very important. All right, so just a couple of final thoughts before we go into our Q&A.
Absolutely. So perfecting your personal statement. You can, again, refine and perfect your personal statement to the very last minute that it is due. And it's important to keep refining as much as you possibly can, but of course, within reason, don't overthink it. perfecting your personal statement can have a significant impact on your chances of being admitted to your desired college or program. And remember, you are competing against a number of applicants, so you do want to present that the best version of yourself, as Fedjounie already said. A well-crafted personal statement can help you stand out from other applicants and make that memorable first impression. So make sure that you are using all the tools that we already stated before, getting other people's opinion and perspective, using the grammar checks and spelling checks, presenting the authentic version of yourself to truly bring across in your personal statement. And again, refining, and doing multiple versions of your personal statement is perfectly okay. And it's the best way to get the best product to submit to your future university.
Great. Fedjounie, anything else to add here before we go into the Q&A?
Yes, definitely take advantage of the personal statement. As I said, like, it's one of the very important qualitative things that you can submit with your application, as well as letters of recommendation, right? And those shorter response for specific colleges. So your writing throughout this process will be as equally important as the work that you've already done in your classroom. So really take that into consideration and prioritize time, right? Like, this is a process that takes some time to really create something that you're proud of. Oh, yes, and also your Common App extracurriculars, right? Think about how you can use all those different things strategically, right? Because they're getting several different pieces that paint the whole story. So your personal statement doesn't usually stand alone, right? Think about how it integrates with those other qualitative pieces of your application as well.
It's a great piece of advice. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, Q&A. So feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A box. And we have Fedjounie and Arianna here to give you all of their wisdom. Let's see, the first question we have is, what is the balance between getting people to help you proofread, change language, etc., compared to being truly authentic? If the way you talk and write isn't polished, won't the essay seem inauthentic?
Yes, I can hop in on that. Thank you, David. I think that there is definitely a hard balance it's a hard balance, right? To keep your own voice while you're having several different editors. And that's why I recommended, like, taking advice with a grain of salt. Because sometimes there are edits that are, okay, this is a grammatical issue I have to fix. This is a spelling issue I have to fix to really drive my message across. And then there are other structural, right? Like, I want you to change your entire first paragraph, right? That would be inauthentic to the student if this is what they want to share, right? If there's a recommendation of, like, how we can spin this in a positive light, that isn't necessarily being inauthentic, but it's thinking about the way the reader will take the information you're presenting in the personal statement. So we're not telling students to get rid of their own voice, right? Like you say, the way you talk. So if there is a point where you want to add dialogue, that's the way you talk. And it's not necessarily like English, right? Like, some of my students have written the French language in their personal statement and translated it, or haven't translated, but adding some context in their next paragraph. Like, that's something that I wouldn't be against. And it also adds a little layer. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think you answered that well. Arianna, anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I would, I think that was answered wonderfully, but I would say the question, if you mean this, David, if the way you talk / write isn't polished, I would still say to not to make sure you proofread, unless you are putting it in quotations of what you're talking about. Like Fedjounie said, with dialogue being included in your personal essay. Otherwise, I would avoid not polishing your essay. I would polish your essay. That's what I'm trying to say. Make sure you polish your essay, and it won't come across inauthentic because it's not changing your voice, but it is making it grammatically understandable.
All right. Do different kinds of colleges, example, liberal arts, engineering, have different have preferences for certain kinds of essays? I think, I'm assuming we're talking about the personal statement here, because I know some schools will have other supplemental essays as well.
Yes, so I can jump in on that question. So there are different like prompts that most schools will ask, and depending on whether they're like a STEM focused, like research centered school, there may be more technical prompts where they're trying to get written examples of students' work within the science, like if they've published or things like that. But typically the same, like developing a narrative using key themes, like that's how you would use all your responses. So colleges want you to respond to the question with providing evidence. It's very similar to a lot of the advice they give to people in careers in terms of like framing your resume, right? Like showing that you have these values or that you've had these specific results, but through specific examples. So there may be a question about, for like an engineering school, right? Like tell us about an academic topic that really excites you. So that would be more technical writing, but the student could use more of the creative narrative lens to present, oh, this is how I was introduced to the academic topic. This is how I've expanded, right? That initial understanding. I joined a club, I created blah, blah, blah. And this is how I hope to continue within this academic subsector, right? So there are different ways that you can use the same writing format for different kinds of essays, because that's ultimately what you want to present. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that sounded great. Arianna, anything else there?
No, I say you hit that on the head. No.
All right. Next question. So how do you keep from sounding overly boastful when you are not? An example, my mom actually won an essay contest about humility, but how would one announce that, since it would be contrary to the concepts?
That is wonderful. My mom actually won an essay contest about humility. I would say that again, you listing, sometimes coming across as listing things that you've done will come across quote unquote boastful. But again, you're trying to get across to the admissions reader in a creative way, in a way that is authentic to you, things that you've done. I would avoid listing everything that you've done back to back to back. You don't want it to sound like a resume, which will again come across as boastful. So weaving in things that you've done that you're proud of, you don't want to think of that as I'm boasting by including my accomplishment, but why is this accomplishment important to you to include in the first place? What was impactful about the accomplishment as far as why you're even talking about it?
You're saying show, don't tell.
Yes, thank you. Yes, indeed. Show, don't tell. Absolutely.
Fedjounie, anything else to add here?
Yes, I definitely agree with Arianna, right? Think about more so the impact, or use some of those literary devices, right? Like if you're presenting winning an essay contest about humility, but not really want to be boastful, like make it a joke. How do you think someone would win an essay contest about humility, right? And then go through that story. Think about ways that you can acknowledge, right, that sharing this may seem boastful, but that this has contributed to the rest of the personal statement, right? This couldn't be a personal statement about just winning the essay contest about humility. You have to go a bit deeper into why that matters, why you were in the essay contest in the first place, right? Like think about all of those key things that play into that accomplishment and display that instead of like, this is it. I got it. I'm the best, you know? So yes.
Great answers. All right, so we'll leave the questions open for another minute or so. So if you have any, feel free to pop them in. But in the meantime, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for taking time out of their Tuesday night to join us. And Fedjounie and Arianna, it was really great to have you both here and gain some wisdom. And yeah, for everyone joining us, be on the lookout for an email from Quad with the recording of this webinar. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. If you need help with your personal statement, you can work with people like Arianna and Fedjounie on perfecting those, crafting them, choosing what schools to apply to. And then also, if you look at our webinars page, we have a bunch of webinars coming up. I think the one next week is on deciding what schools to apply to and how to craft that list and do the research there. I hope everyone has a really fantastic night.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.